Today, we're going to be talking about living with uncertainty and doubt.
We just have this good vibes only. We have this toxic positivity. Just look on the bright side. No, sometimes things suck. Embrace it and be real and choose to control the things you can, which might be focusing on some bright spots. There's a lot of, I think, messaging around happiness that just needs to be dismantled. I like to tell people the biggest source of fake news is inside your head. They take little pieces of information and they connect the dots. It's not always accurate. I think the biggest takeaway, if someone could really get this, oh, my mind is just this thing, it's kind of a jerk, and here's how it works, and I'm going to be in charge of my life, not it, I think they would live very differently.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. As always, if you're interested in the work that we're doing with Know OCD, or if you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, you can check us out at knowcd.com. And if you like the Get to Know OCD podcast, you can subscribe on our YouTube channel or anywhere that you get your favorite podcast at. Today, I'm very excited. An old friend. It's been a while, and to have Dr. Ashley Smith here today. So, Ashley, hello. Good to see you again.
Hi. It's so good to see you too. I'm really excited to be here this morning.
You have done many cool things, one being a TED Talk, and I'm so jealous of you because that's one thing I aspire to one day. So fingers
You
are
should do
crossed.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Offline, we'll chat.
Yeah.
But for people who don't know you, I mean, you have a book out now, The Way I See It, A Psychologist's Guide to a Happier Life, which
Mhm.
is just wonderful. Great, tons of awesome quotes in there and everything. And it isn't just about being a psychologist and having a happier life, but you're really open about some personal things in there. So I thought, let me give you the platform for a few moments just to tell everybody a little bit about you and what led to that, and then kind of what leads into our conversation for today, really.
Sure, that sounds great. So I'm Dr. Ashley. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've specialized in the treatment of anxiety and OCD for about 8 billion years now. I work with really cool, awesome, smart people who have overactive nervous systems. And essentially, what I mean by that is anxiety is a natural experience that we all have. It's our body's built in threat detection system. And the people I work with, they just have threat detection systems who are too good at its job. So they're seeing um, potential bad things, potential harmful things in places where maybe they don't need to be feeling anxious. But what I love about it is they can get better. So I love that and have done clinical work in a variety of settings, children's hospitals and an anxiety specialty center. And I've been in private practice for about 8 years now. And I have always practiced what I preached, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, the tenets there. It's stuff I think everybody should know. We'd all be better off if we understood how our minds work and how anxiety works. And then for me, that's the professional side. On the personal side, I also have a really rare degenerative retinal disease. So I have a condition that makes me legally and increasingly blind. And I don't know prognosis wise, I don't know how bad it gets. There are no treatment options. So it's been a journey to really come to terms with that. And for me, I think the real turning point was about 9 years ago. My vision loss progressed to the point where I had to stop driving. So prior to that, I could fake normal pretty well. I'm well adapted, as my doctors call it, but
Mm-hmm.
I can fake sight pretty well. And but you just can't fake it when it comes to driving a car, right? So
They prefer you don't. Yeah, that's
right?
less time. Yeah,
Hurtling down the road in a
yeah,
multi-thousand-dollar death machine, if you
yeah,
can't see the cars in front of you, it's a problem.
yeah.
So I
Mm-hmm.
was essentially thrust out of the disability closet and I had to face this oh my gosh, what do I do now? And I really thought, I mean, I can joke about it now, but back then I really was
Oh,
devastated and I
of
thought
course. Mm-hmm.
life was essentially over. The beliefs that I had around my vision and the reason I'd hid it for so long, it was a lot of shame, a lot of fear, and a lot of beliefs of you can't be successful personally or professionally. No one's going to want you. No one's going to want to work with you or be connected to you. And ultimately, I thought I couldn't be independent and I thought I just couldn't be happy. So I used all of my CBT skills and they weren't cutting it. Just to be honest, I was
Mm-hmm.
found myself really wallowing and at some point got fed up with it and realized, well, I can't change my vision I can't do anything about that. So what can I do? And I'm a giant nerd. So I did what I know how to do, and that's dive into science and the science of happiness. And through that, and really kind of taking what I know about anxiety and what I was learning about happiness, started to experiment. I got really lucky along the way. So I can look back in hindsight and say, oh, these were the pieces that got me to this point that as psychologists we would call acceptance, right? It
Hmm.
is what it is, not struggling against it. But that's where I've gotten. And so now I still see a handful of patients, but I do a lot of speaking and a lot of writing. And my mission really is to take what we know from psychology and make it widely available, because I don't want people struggling anymore. Life is hard enough that we don't need our minds getting in the way and making it worse. So that's me in a nutshell.
So what is happiness?
Oh man, that is such a fantastic question, right? So I remember my master's thesis was actually the link between happiness, optimism, and social anxiety. And I
Okay.
remember sitting at a Village Inn, which is like a diner,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, sure.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm sitting in a Village Inn with my two best friends from graduate school, and they were so annoying. I mean, so right, but I was working on my thesis, and that's what they were like. Well, what is happiness? And I said, happiness. But as you know, if we're going to study something, we have to be able to define it,
Absolutely.
right?
Hmm.
So way back then, I went with, oh, it's just the subjective feeling of well-being. But honestly, I think of happiness like there's the emotion that floats through, right? That I think a lot of people actually mix up with pleasure, enjoyment, fun. Those are transient. They're going to come and go. I think happiness is really more of satisfaction, like feeling satisfied that you're living a good life, whatever that looks like for you, living in alignment with your values. And sometimes that means feeling anxious, and sometimes that means doing hard things. And I still think that's the path to
Hmm.
happiness, which is overall just enjoying and feeling good about the way that you're moving through the world.
Is happiness ever fully achieved, or is it something we can always work toward?
Love these questions. I think I think the issue when people conflate happiness with pleasure
Yeah.
or peace or the absence of anxiety, right? I'm sure you have a lot of people you work with, I certainly do, who like kind of say, oh, if anxiety's not here, then I'm happy. And
Yeah.
I don't think
Hmm.
that's the same thing. So I think if you're chasing pleasure or peace, you're never going to get there, right? There's this hedonic treadmill. Um, we have this amazing ability to come back to our baseline, right? So if something throws us off one way or the other, we come back to baseline. It's an amazing thing from anxiety, right? You face your fear and then you come back to baseline. Like you get used to it. The same thing happens with happiness. So when people look to external things, when I get this job, this relationship, this new outfit, whatever it is, that happiness is fleeting because you're going to come back to baseline. But I
Hmm.
think we can find lasting satisfaction. And I think that's kind of a really long winded way of saying no and yes.
Yeah. No, and I think that ties nicely into the work that we do with anxiety and OCD, where
Absolutely.
sometimes the people we're working with will say, "Well, I'll finally be okay when I don't have an intrusive thought or image or urge
Mhm.
anymore." And we, of course, say, "Well, that's never going to happen because we're
Exactly.
human and we have them." Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. Like my own personal journey with vision loss has really been acceptance, right? This My
Totally.
vision is not going to get better. It is
Hmm.
worse than it has ever been before, and yet it is such a smaller part of my day-to-day experience. I mean, if my eyes are open, I'm aware that I can't see the way that I used to.
Sure.
And
Hmm.
yet, when I think back to when I first stopped driving, I mean, I had this thought, a pretty dominant thought, like I can't see, I can't see, I can't see, just constantly. And that doesn't come up very much at all. And I think it's a function of acceptance. And we have to do that with OCD as well, right? To understand these thoughts are going to come and go. Acceptance is really being indifferent to them. That's how I think about it anyway. It's like being indifferent to these thoughts, or me being indifferent to my vision, and figuring out I can't change those things. So how do I minimize the impact that they have and make the best of the situation? I found this, it's embarrassing to admit, but I talk about it pretty openly. I have a habit of finding life changing advice through Facebook memes. And one of them was just because life gives you a cactus doesn't mean you have to sit on it. I have a
Oh, I like
cactus,
that. Yeah.
right? And, I
Yeah.
have my vision
hmm
loss, and our patients have OCD, and everybody has some sort of cactus, and we don't have to sit on it. We can carve out
Yeah.
life better. Hmm.
And it's interesting since we're both being very personal today. When my wife was dying with the
Hmm.
cancer, she kept apologizing to me as if it was her fault, and she felt so sorry that
Oh,
our marriage didn't turn out to be what we thought it would. We didn't travel the way there was no family or anything.
yeah.
And I tried my damnedest to be like, "Hun, I'm not. I've never once blamed you for getting cancer, but it was
Right.
so hard for her to not feel at fault or something for the
Hmm.
fact that this has happened." Do you see that with people a lot?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I can, I feel for you both so much in that, right? Because things don't go the way we expect them to. And I think it's been really interesting being in mental health over the last, 5 years in particular, because I think COVID was a really big challenge in acceptance. And what I would see is on paper,
Mhm.
people kind of looking at the same age, same kind of point in life, same hobbies, same anxiety symptoms, and wildly different reactions to
Yeah.
COVID because some were, this isn't how it's supposed to be, really stuck in that non acceptance, that expectations, and trying to control things that they can't. And I'd see other people who were just more resilient and flexible saying, well, I can't control that. Here's what I can. And I think across the board, all the years of working with anxiety, whatever flavor it is, so much of it boils down to getting really clear on what you can and can't control. I
Yeah.
can't control my vision. We can't control intrusive thoughts. I can't control other people's beliefs or attitudes or actions. So I see people, and I know you do too, trying to control those things. Ooh,
Yeah.
outcomes, the future, right? And here's the kicker: not controlling the things we can, which are like how I choose to spend my time, what I choose to focus on. So attention is a huge one. That's a mindfulness move, right? That
hmm
was huge for me. Attitude. I may not like it, but I can choose to have a good attitude and try to make the best of it, or I can choose to sit on the cactus. So I
Yeah.
see tons of people really just struggle with that non-acceptance, or and I think a lot of people also feeling responsible for things that that aren't ours to control. So
Right. And you're absolutely right in terms of the ways that we look at things. I
mhm.
I loved COVID in a sense because when Susan was sick, we weren't going out and doing anything. So when
Yeah,
COVID hit, then no one else was doing anything, and there's this weird selfishness for a little while that I had of, well, finally, I'm not missing out on everybody
right,
doing everything and hearing all these things because now nobody's doing anything, and I didn't feel so bad, and that was a really weird realization for me. Be like, here's the thing, as you said, where so many people are struggling and everything, and
right.
I'm actually like, cool. I'm not
Well,
missing out anymore. Yeah.
how human, right? Like that just
Yeah.
makes sense. And the
Yeah.
thing is, this is a soapbox that I will hop on any chance I get is I really truly do not believe that anything is good or bad. I
Well,
think,
I couldn't agree with that more.
right?
Honestly.
It's like it totally
Yeah.
depends on the context. And so,
hmm
one of the practices that I think when I look back really helped me get to this acceptance place, and it wasn't intentional. I got lucky on it, but I try to talk my patients and pretty much anyone I talk to into it because I think it's such a transformative life practice. I started having a new experience every week, right? So I started this in 2017 on a whim as a New Year's resolution. By the end of the year, I realized this is something big. And so I've continued going with it. So however many years that is now. But my point being, what it has done is train me to see the value in experience.
Yeah.
So I don't even I don't think there are any bad experiences. They are hard or unpleasant or uncomfortable, but not bad. And
hmm
same thing with COVID, right? There were great things that came out of COVID. Everybody's talking about mental health now because it's okay to recognize we're struggling. And QR codes, they make my life so much easier when I can
I
just
bet they
scan
do.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
hmm
So
hmm
I think that's such a huge thing. And so many people judge, right? This thought is bad. This feeling is bad. This circumstance is bad. And when we label something as bad, all of a sudden our brain says, well, bad is a problem. I shouldn't have this. And either we try to fix it in really unhelpful ways, right? That's all compulsions are, trying to fix it. And and it's just not helpful. So I really love to get rid of good and bad and go with more of a just it's acceptance, it's non-judgment. So
Hmm. So how do you move that to the people that you're working with, like with people with OCD? What is your
mhm.
go-to moves of getting people to accept you're going to have thoughts and images and urges, and
Yeah,
you can live with them instead of fight them all day long?
that is a hard thing, right?
Hmm.
Because I don't think I think of acceptance as both a process, so it's a journey and a skill. And so and I don't think it's an easy one. So in all of the things that we do in treatment, I think acceptance and getting sleep on track. Those are two really difficult things to do. So I start from day one educating, right? We're not going to get rid of anxiety. We don't want to get rid of anxiety. It serves
Right.
a purpose. We can't get rid of these thoughts. The more, brains are like toddlers and they're throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And if they get a reaction from you, they're going to keep going, right? Like I think of little cuties, if they cuss and the grown-ups around them laugh or get mad, right? Stop saying that. That's a bad word. What do? They put it on repeat and they just
Hmm.
keep because they're getting attention, and our brains are like that. So I start from day one of I know you're here because you don't want to feel this way, but you're going to. And no one wants to hear that. But I think it's, as we go really working on, I find myself really working there. Like exposures are the bread and butter, right? Of OCD treatment. You have to face your fears. And honestly, I kind of live that way in general. I never want anxiety to be the reason why I don't do something.
Okay. Hmm.
And so I think that's part of it. But then I also think there's a huge part of pulling in, well, who are you? Right? It's values work. Who are you? I think this is going to sound morbid, but I think a lot about death every day. I think about death, and people kind of look at me. And to me, it's a very motivating thing to recognize that time is limited. It is our most limited resource, and we don't know how much we have. It's like if you had a bank account, there's some money in there. You have no idea how much. You just know there's not ever going to be more added. You
Hmm.
have to be really intentional about how you spend your time. And I think as we can start to do that, then we have this choice, right? Like in any given moment, are you going to feed anxiety, right? Are you going to give into it? Are you going to let it call the shots? Or can you be strong enough, brave enough, open enough to really do the things that matter to you? So that I think about deathbed Ashley, and when she looks back, is she going to feel like, yes, I'm satisfied with the way I spent my time? And I infuse this in conversations with people. So,
Yeah. I ask patients or members that we're working with,
mhm.
will you spend the rest of your life sitting next to your tombstone wondering when you're going to be under it, or will you arrive on the day of your death thinking, well, that was a good time?
That is amazing. Yeah, I
Hmm.
love that. I've done the whole like draw it out like, okay, here we are. You've got two paths in life. You can worry, 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 die. Or
Die
you can
or
worry, have some fun, connect with people, have some adventures, worry, do some more cool things, and then die.
and
Like,
then die. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
either way. So I think about that a ton.
Yeah. You have often said something that I love, and that I have said so many times, the idea that a thought is not a fact,
Yeah.
and the things that pop into our head uh, may or may not be true.
Hmm.
And yet, one of the greatest confusions I think some of the people that we work with is, if I think it, it must be true. Or if I
Yeah.
feel it, it must be true. Or if I have
Hmm.
an urge, it must really have a meaning behind it or something. So I wonder if you can dispel some of the myth around that for
Yeah.
the folks that are watching, because that is so important to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's lots of different ways to come at this. And I think two things sort of pop in my head. One is I like to tell people the biggest source of fake news is inside your head,
Hmm.
right? Our brains. I love to get into the weeds about how our minds work. And essentially they take little pieces of information and they connect the dots.
Yeah.
And it's not always accurate. And we just people don't know that, right? We think because I'm thinking it, it's real, meaningful, and it's a directive I must follow. The other way I like to start to make this point is, think about your stomach, right? We have a stomach, and a stomach growls and it gurgles and it does all this stuff, right? But we don't say, I am growling. We say, my stomach is growling. right? And sometimes we
Hmm.
listen to it and feed it or stop eating, and sometimes we tune it out,
Hmm.
right? We have a heart and our hearts pound and pump and beat, but I don't say I am pounding. My
Well, I
heart is
love
pounding.
this.
It
I
does,
love
right?
this. This is, yeah.
Mine,
Oh, that's so cool.
mine's think.
Yeah.
That's what they
Hmm.
do. They're thought
Yeah.
generating machines. So it's like a mental stomach growl, right? But
Hmm.
somehow we identify with it because it sounds like us, because it's I or you. So we somehow think it's us. And so I really start to go, like, stomachs growl, hearts beat, minds think. And so I model it in my language with other people of my mind is saying this. I'm having the thought that, to really start to get that distance of it's just a mental grumble. And then if we go with the toddler thing, if I don't give it attention, so not like, la, 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 I don't want to have this thought. It's just like, oh, whatever, you do you. I'm over here doing me. And if you ignore it, you don't react to it emotionally, you don't judge it, and you don't let it guide your action, it'll fade.
I'm growling. I'm going to say from now on, if my
Yeah.
stomach growls,
I
I'm
am
growling.
growling. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, oh man, there's so many ways I can go with it, but this is
Right?
a PG show, so I won't say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really,
Exactly.
I really, really like it. You know,
Yeah.
with your experience of
Mhm.
living with a chronic condition, right?
Mhm.
And I think that you'd agree we could see OCD as something that's going to be with us for the rest of our life. It is
Absolutely.
a
At least
chronic,
so far.
yeah.
Mhm.
We haven't, yeah, we haven't figured that out part yet. So, um, and going back to your notions earlier of the idea of acceptance, one thing that I have talked about with some folks, and I love your opinion on it, is there's nothing that couldn't be justified with the phrase "it feels like,"
Mhm.
right? Or "I feel like." And I'm wondering, when you get people you're working with who will jump into that, but it feels true, but it feels like, but it feels, how do you help someone challenge through that experience? Because now we're going beyond just the thought, which someone might be able to say, okay, it's a thought, but now, but
It
it
feels
also
good.
feels like, and that's
Yeah.
almost seems to be a next level for a lot of folks we're working
Yeah, there's a couple things that I like to do. One, I can sometimes be a little bit of a stickler on, we say I feel like, what we actually mean is I think,
with. Yeah,
right? Like
I,
feelings are one word, except for maybe pissed off, right? And otherwise, like I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel
yeah,
scared. If you're saying I feel like something bad is going to happen, no, I'm having the thought that something bad is going to happen. But that piece aside, I do a lot of teaching people, sort of broader than OCD, but just in general, this is how minds work. They want to keep us alive while conserving energy.
hmm,
So they're always looking for threat. How do I keep her safe? And how do I do it with expending the least amount of energy possible?
hmm,
So one thing they do, they look for patterns, they connect the dots, and then they create rules. And all of those rules are just beliefs, right? Like, don't touch a doorknob, you could get sick. Don't, you must know, or you can't handle it. I'm the kind of person who does or doesn't do this. So, all of these, either obsessions, beliefs, identity, all of these things form the bound of your comfort zone. And
yeah,
I really would rather call it familiarity zone than comfort zone, because it's not always comfortable in there. Like for me, I spent a long time in this zone of, if people know about your vision, they're going to reject you. So
mm,
don't tell
hmm,
them. And as long as you stay in that little familiarity zone, your brain gets to relax a little bit, right? Because it's like, I know what to expect. You're fine. If you stretch out of that zone, you're going to get what I use the super professional term, inside ick, right? You're going to feel uncomfortable in some way. And all that means is you just broke a rule. You're stretching your comfort zone.
yeah.
You're getting out of the familiar. It doesn't mean something bad is going to happen. So I like to tell people that, right? Like, yes, of course you feel anxious. Doesn't mean that's a true alarm. It just means you're doing something different. And if we can go back to different's not bad,
Right.
and where you can be brave and who do you want to be, then it's really building that tolerance for ick, for discomfort.
I think Inside Ick is in the new DSM coming out in
I
a few
think
years.
so,
I
right?
believe that's a new category that they're going to,
Yeah.
yeah. So you take all these experiences from your
Mhm.
professional life you have this experience in your personal life,
Mhm.
and you're driven to a book. And
Yeah,
so I'm wondering if you could kind of walk us through, you know, let's talk about the book. I mean, it's
yeah.
because it's a beautiful piece, and I just want to
Thank you.
give you the time to be able to, you know, walk people through this notion of, yes, I did the research on this. I wasn't feeling great. I learned about it, and
Yeah,
now I'm going to share it. And what
yeah.
do you want people who read it? What should they take away from it?
Yeah, so the book is really a compilation of short lessons, right? And my goal is I like to kind of think about it almost like if your best friend and your therapist were in your back pocket. So just to give you advice when you needed it. But the book came about for several reasons, but a handful of years ago, I co founded Peak Mind, which is the Center for Psychological Strength with another psychologist. And our goal is to take what we know from psychology and a kind of adjacent field called life design, which is really carve out your own path. And we wanted to make it more widely accessible. And so, as part of the work through Peak Mind, I started writing our blog articles and our newsletters.
Hmm.
And then over time, realized actually, I think there's a lot of good content here. And when I decided I wanted to publish a book, that seemed like the best starting place. So it's really a lot of my favorite pieces that I had written, kind of grouped together by different categories. And then I wrote a few new pieces to kind of tie it all together. But there's a section in there that's how our minds work, right? And all of it is just stuff that I wish everybody knew, because I think there would be so much less suffering and so many more people living big, bold lives, whether they have anxiety or not, whether there's OCD or not, whether you have whatever your chronic condition, whatever your cactus is. So there's a section on how our minds work and learning to make them work for you, a section on dealing with difficult emotions, including anxiety, but also things like shame and guilt and regret and disappointment. It's a section on relationships, because that's really quality relationships are the number one predictor of life satisfaction. So that needs a lot of work. There's pieces on values, figuring out who you are and what you stand for, pieces on doing hard things and resilience, and then lasting happiness. And so it's everything that I wish I could just give to people and say, just read it. Because if you knew this, life gets bigger, life gets
Yeah,
better. So, yeah.
because I'm assuming you meet people who just say to you, "I'll never be happy again."
Yeah. Like, who says that, right? You're having the thought, I'll never be
Right.
happy again. And then, to be fair, there are a lot of misconceptions around happiness in our culture. Like, we live in a good vibes only culture with, so that it says if you have anxiety or struggle, then you can't be happy. And I can tell you, I decidedly did not enjoy writing my dissertation. It sucked. Would
I
I
did
do it
not
again?
either. I'm going to
Right?
tell you. Yeah.
No one does. Would I do it
Yeah.
again? In a heartbeat,
Mhm.
because it was worth it. I think a lot about the worth it factor, right? I don't love going to the gym. Would I do it again? I do it because it's a gift for future Ashley. But some of these things that we have to think about, right? Like, we just have this like good vibes only. We have this toxic positivity. Just look on the bright side. No, sometimes things suck. Like, embrace it and be real, and choose to control the things you can, which might be focusing on some bright spots. Doesn't cancel out the bad, but we can say, well, yeah, this all sucks, and here's this thing I'm grateful for. There's a lot of, I think, messaging around happiness that just needs to be dismantled, so we can say, wait a minute, let's look at what really, and some lifestyle things like not getting enough sleep, spending too much time on a screen, not being open and authentic with people. Like, there's a lot we do that really works against our happiness.
So let's talk about a few of those.
Mhm.
The importance of sleep. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think sleep is wildly underrated. And when you really dive into the latest research on sleep, it's essentially if you're not getting good sleep, you are wrecking every system in your body with immediate consequences, right? There are things that happen within 24 hours of not getting enough sleep, but certainly over time. But if we look at from an anxiety and a happiness standpoint, it's really hard to manage anxiety if you're not getting enough sleep. And it's really hard to be happy if you're sleep deprived. So I think there are some basics when it comes to just taking care of this biological system that we live in, that we need to do. We need to sleep. We need to eat real food. We need to move our bodies. We need to manage stress. like just some basics. And that alone can take down at least some anxiety, can add some measure of happiness.
One of the things you said earlier was this idea of, we might have this overactive nervous system, coming through. What what does that do to our life, to our day-to-day functioning, our ability to sit in a meeting and even listen to someone, or to fully engage in an experience?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I think there are a few things of one, I think back when I was earlier in my career and I was having a conversation with my mom and I had made the comment that I was just so busy. And her response was, honey, you say that all the time. You're always just so busy. And I look back because right around the time I stopped driving, just before that, I found this field of life design that I mentioned, which is this basically this idea of challenging all of the assumptions and beliefs we have about the way we should or have to live life and carving your own path. So I'd started to dabble with that. And that really challenged a lot of this busy as a badge of honor. So we
Hmm.
do live in a hustle culture where if you're not being productive 24/7, like, and I'm not immune to this. I still have to struggle. I mean, I was raised here and programmed with, good American mindset. And when I take time off, I still have those thoughts. You should be working. You have big goals. Why aren't you doing this? And I have to really decide. It's that choice point. Okay, is that who I want to be? No, I'm someone who also wants to adventure and connect. So I have to make that choice. Um, but I think what happens is we're so busy. And then when we use technology in the ways that a lot of people do, our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So we can't, we're not just present. And I think
Hmm.
that's a huge thing is just, I mean, call it mindfulness, call it presence, call it single
Yeah.
tasking, but we need to just be where we are and focused on what we're doing and tuning out. Like personally, I don't consume a lot of social media. I don't watch TV. I watch movies sometimes. And I'm brutal about my notifications because they hijack your attention. And every time something hijacks your attention, you have to do the work to bring it back. And
Hmm.
over time, it's just exhausting.
How would I know if I had an overactive nervous system?
I think if your brain is constantly busy, like if you can't just I mean, we all know people who cannot just sit. Like, can you sit and be still? No, that is horribly uncomfortable for a lot of people, which tells me that's what you need to
Yeah.
practice. I think if you're feeling constantly tense, you've got that constant just like stress and that sort of pressured way of movement. Like a lot of times I have this phrase like move with ease, slow down. Like it's not a rush. It's not a sprint. You don't have to get there quick. And I think we can tell that. I also think if you are someone who constantly jumps to the worst case scenario,
Yeah.
constantly notices the bad over the good, then that's just sort of it's our default programming. It's the way our minds work by default, but it goes into overdrive. And the more stressed we are, the less we're doing the things that I think fuel happiness, the more those tendencies come out. And we live in a society that is amplifying those for sure.
I asked someone once to do an ERP exercise,
Hmm.
and I said, I want you to go out. There's a little park across the street there. There's a bench in the middle of the park. I could see it from my window. There was nobody in the park. I want you to leave your phone, your keys, everything here in my office.
Oh, the
And I want you
horror.
to go sit on that bench over there for 10 minutes
Yeah.
and do absolutely nothing other than sit on the bench. And they
Yeah.
just burst into tears.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard, right?
Hmm.
Because it's either I think people are trying to avoid the mind, right? I don't want to have these thoughts. I don't want to have these feelings. So it's just stay busy, busy, busy to distract from it. Or there's this guilt that comes up from the hustle culture, right? You should be doing something. It's just uncomfortable. I think it's the greatest thing to go. I mean, one of my favorite things is to go lay on a beach and read for a little bit, meditate for a little bit, and just be. But we don't get a lot of opportunity to do that. Just and especially not if you're working and balancing kids or caretaking or anything. It's just our culture's not set up for it.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? I love some of the cultures that put a mandatory break in work in the
right?
middle of the day. You know,
Yeah.
go home, be with your family a little bit, have a little meal, take a nap,
Yeah.
and then come back. And
Well,
you know how
yeah.
amazing that is. Right?
It would be amazing. There's like two things that pop in my head. One, I mentioned this, I think about dying. There was this, I think I read it as a blog post. I think it came from a book that went viral years ago from a woman named Bronnie Ware. And it was they're a palliative care nurse. And it was
Mm,
the five regrets of the dying. No one
mm,
says,
mm.
I wish I had worked more. They say, I wish I had spent more
Yeah,
time with family. I
yeah.
wish I had let myself be happy. I wish I had accepted me for me, those kind of things. Then I also think I took a trip to Nicaragua earlier this year
Mm,
and
mm.
met some folks from Australia who were chatting, and they said they were on a 6 month sabbatical from work. Right, this
Yeah,
is their jobs are there, and they asked, "Is it true Americans only get 2 weeks of vacation a year?" And I said, "Yeah, if they're lucky." And the look of horror
yeah,
on their face, and so there's just some things, and I don't want to bash our culture, but just to be aware of how we're shaped and that we don't necessarily have to live by those rules.
yeah. Yeah, or Europe, like don't go to like northern or central Europe during the month of August because most of the shops are going to be closed because they're all on vacation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, these I I hope someday we kind of swing the pendulum back a little bit
I do
into
too.
that. And
Yeah,
yeah, I was saddened one of the places that I went to when I was a kid closed down, and there were a myriad of reasons for people not going on vacation there anymore. But one of them was everyone started bringing phones and was isolating and being on their phone instead of what we did as a kid is we were all the kids were together, all the adolescents were together, all the adults were together. I never saw
yeah,
my parents for a week basically because I was just hanging out. We were just in this enclosed, cool
yeah.
resort
And just
area.
connecting.
Yeah,
Well, and that, to kind of tangent a little bit, as I think about happiness and what makes a good life, I said quality relationships, the number one predictor based on data, right? But we know that. We know that. But we live right now, at least here, in a way that keeps us very disconnected, right? The Surgeon General named loneliness as it's a pandemic. It is a public health crisis
yeah,
with 50% of American adults feeling chronic loneliness, right? We're disconnected in a way that isn't good for us. I mean, loneliness is worse for your health than smoking a pack a day, right?
mm,
And like, so let's just put that in perspective. So when I think about it, whether this is just sort of lifestyle, right? How do we connect, and all of the fear that comes up, right? So many people I mean, we have to present this certain image, right? I can't share that this was, and that was my journey, right? Do not share about your vision or
yeah,
people will shun you.
yeah,
And it took, honestly, I didn't mean to do it at the time, but it was essentially exposure work, right? I didn't have a
hmm,
choice when I stopped driving. I had to tell people. It functioned like exposure. Once I freaked out, melted down in the floor, hyperventilating. I mean, it was really scary. And then my biggest fears didn't come true. And over the years, I've gotten much more comfortable about speaking openly about that, but not even just about my vision, just as a person. Here's what I really think. Here's how I really feel. And when we can be authentic and when we are willing to be vulnerable, so that's putting ourselves out there without quite knowing how it's going to land, we connect so much more. And so I think as a culture, we need to be doing that. That to me seems like the antidote to loneliness. But then if I bring it back to OCD, there's so much, either the anxiety itself disconnects, right? Because if you're busy engaging with OCD, you're not engaging in your life,
right.
right? Or there's so much shame around it. So then people are hiding it instead of just saying, yeah, I have this condition and here are the weird thoughts that I have. And if we could just, I guess that's an acceptance move, and like destigmatize and then really lean on support. And if people understood it better, then support, people could help more. But I think, yeah, all of this stuff just helps us live a better life. And we need to be looking for like what's getting in the way and how can we be brave enough to face it.
As people get the book, they're reading it. What are your hopes of the things they're going to get out of it? What? what do you, what would be like,
Yeah.
if someone walked away from it thinking or feeling something, what would give you the smile on your face?
Yeah, my ultimate hope is that I wanna change the way people think. So, I think the biggest takeaway, if someone could really get this, "Oh, my mind is just this thing, it's kind of a jerk, and here's how it works, and I'm gonna be in charge of my life, not it,"
Hmm.
I think they would live very differently. And so
Yes, the
that's
jerky mind.
yeah,
We always have to be wary of that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
because and I say that about OCD. It's a bit of a jerk, right?
completely.
It will it will rain on every parade that it can.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I really think if more people understood this is just how minds work, we wouldn't be so tripped up about it, right? Like if I go back to the stomach thing, I just know my stomach's going to growl.
Yeah,
Sometimes I feed it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it does this, but it doesn't control my life experience in the same way.
I want to. This just popped in my head. So
Mhm.
once in a while, well, and maybe even more, maybe more often, we're working with people who think this is their fault,
Mhm.
or their parents think it's their fault. Their kid has OCD or something. And then I saw that with Susan with the cancer.
Yeah.
How about for you? What was your kind of journey through? Did you do something wrong? Did your parents at all feel like, I could have, or just what?
Yeah.
And how do you come to the other side of that, which is most important?
Yeah, personally, I didn't really experience that
Okay.
side of things. Like, I
Hmm.
knew it was genetic. I knew it ran in families.
Gotcha. Okay.
Back in the day, I mean, I spent probably 30 years without a diagnosis because science just hadn't caught up to it. So I was in
Gotcha.
my like
Okay.
mid to late 30s before I got like this is what it is. So for
Understood.
me, it was more the struggle of the uncertainty, the shame, and if people know I'm not going to be able to live life, right? Like ultimately, I can't be happy with
Yeah.
blindness. But I do see a lot of people really struggling with fault. And frankly, I think it is a waste of time and energy. So, one of the best sort of tenets from life design that I really like, and I do weave this into my clinical work and conversations with people, is this notion of radical responsibility. And
Hmm.
radical responsibility holds that you are 100% responsible for 100% of the choices that you make. So it's
Hmm.
not about like blame and fault are sort of backward looking. That's like,
Yeah.
how did I get here? Why did I get here? And radical responsibility says it doesn't really matter because you can't change it, right? So, what are you going to do moving forward? Doesn't matter why my vision is what it is. Like, I mean, my grandmother was affected. My dad didn't know he was
Mm.
until he developed symptoms after I did. So he thought he was fine. So easy for me to say he didn't know.
Yeah.
Couldn't,
Right. Right.
so there's no blame there. And it just is what it is. But it's what are we going to do moving forward? And I think it's a little bit different with OCD because so much of it is behavioral and people struggle with that, right? Like if you break an arm, it's like, oh, yeah, that happened to you. Even cancer, that's, oh, this happened to you. Maybe not. I think it
Yeah.
sounds like Susan took on a lot of
No.
it.
No. You're right though.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
that's something that
You're
happens
absolutely right.
to you. But then we get mad about OCD or addiction or
Yeah.
depression. And it's like, why can't you just? And people really struggle to understand it's because the mind is doing, I mean, what they're designed to do, but like on steroids in this really tragic. Honestly, it's kind of a tragic condition, and that just adds
Yeah.
to it. So I think it's like doesn't matter why. What are we doing moving forward?
Absolutely. And it does go even to a little bit of that discussion we had earlier about control. We are
Absolutely.
never in total control of our brain,
Hmm. Yes,
ever.
that's a huge thing, though, right? And I'm sure you run into that all the time. We people have this belief I can control my brain, and I'm like, not any more than you can your stomach
Good
or
luck.
your
Right.
heart,
Hmm.
right? Like we can't control. If you could, it's the whole like whatever you do, don't think about chocolate cake right now, right? Now everybody
Uh-huh.
wants dessert.
Yeah. I want some chocolate cake. Yeah.
Yeah, like we
Hmm.
can't control that. And that's hard. People don't like that. But I think if you can wrap your head around it, it sort of changes things.
Yeah. What's next? What do you take with the book? Where do you go with this? What do you want to move forward toward? And
Yeah.
and doing that with this condition that you have fully accepted is there and that is just chronic and potentially gets worse over time.
Mhm.
And yet the attitude you bring to it is just beautiful. So
Thank
what's
you.
moving forward?
Yeah, it's certainly been a journey to get here, but I'm very grateful the path
You
that
mean it
through,
didn't day one? You weren't just like,
right?
okay, we're good.
Just
Yeah,
woke up.
yeah,
Yeah, and I hit kind of rock bottom and then, figure stuff out. But so I'm doing a lot of speaking. My goal really is to I want to change the way that we approach mental health and well-being. I want to change the way people think and cut down on suffering. So doing a lot more speaking and don't see that stopping. I just started recording an audiobook. It doesn't make sense to have this book that I can't actually see to read. And
yeah.
then, people with my vision impaired community. So I started recording the audiobook this week. And so that'll be out by the end of the year, hopefully. And then I
Wonderful.
have a couple more books I want to write. So I want to do one about your mind being a jerk in the here's the like the insight, the user manual that I wish
Yeah.
everybody had. And I want to do one on courage and confidence and the comfort zones and how we can do that, but really taking everything we know about anxiety and then getting it out of just a clinical population to because everybody can benefit from this. OCD or
Yeah.
not, anxiety or not, we could all benefit from this stuff.
Well, I'll write a blurb if you want one. I'd be happy to. It would be
Thank you. I will take
fun.
you. I learned a whole lot about book marketing
Blurbs
and
and
launching.
forewords and yes, all those things. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And then I've got, some personal goals. I'm someone who likes to have adventures and have goals that I'm working on. So I want to dip my toe into stand-up comedy and do some more travel and just keep, I don't know, collecting these experiences and trying new things.
I have done stand up, and it was one of the best things I ever did to improve my public speaking and my confidence in the work
Yeah,
that I do.
yeah.
It was an amazing experience.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of my goals for this year. So I have 2.5 months left.
Hmm.
We'll see. It may not happen, but
Yeah.
it will at some point. We'll see if it's this year.
There's even a group in Chicago of psychologists who started an improv troupe, and that's what they do on weekends. They do shows. So,
Oh, that's awesome. But I think
yeah.
I do see, increasing stuff about improv and anxiety. And
Oh,
I would,
it's
my
amazing.
background is
Yeah.
also, yeah.
Hmm.
I spent a lot of time ballroom and swing dancing. And I think there's
Mm.
an avenue for that to target anxiety too. But both of those require you to be present, to
Hmm.
not know what's coming next and to react in the moment. And that's going to build confidence, which is just trust that you can handle stuff. So good practices.
And the beauty of that is even with a vision issue, you could still swing dance, you could still
Yes,
ballroom dance.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
had a buddy who played golf who was completely blind, and he loved it. He absolutely loved
Interesting.
it. Yes, he would have
Yeah.
a guy there. He'd set him up and tell him, "All right, it's this far away," and he figured out how to practice swings and do things. And there was a sound emitter by the hole, so he knew where to putt toward. And it was absolutely incredible.
Well, see, but I think that that's such a great example, right? So many times we have this thought, our mind says, you can't do that. People like
Yeah,
you can't do that. And I really like to come back, well, if it can be done, why not by me?
right.
Right. So
Hmm.
all right, if people play golf, why not by me? How can you adapt and how can you conquer it? And I think that's huge. Anxiety makes people feel so much less capable than they
Right.
really are, right? It's you can't handle this. And I think we can do so much more than our mind thinks we can if you
Absolutely.
have the courage.
Take us out. Tell us about the book, where they can get it, where they should go to see more from you.
Yeah.
Fill us in. Hmm.
Yeah. So the book is available through Amazon and not Amazon. So if you search it on Amazon, it's the way I see it, Ashley Smith. So you have to use my name. Turns out it's a great title. Lots of other people
Mm-hmm.
thought so too. It's linked. The both Amazon and non-Amazon are linked through my website, which is also a great place to connect with me. That's drashleysmith.com. And then on social, I'm at Dr. Ashley Smith. And so I am dipping my toe into Instagram and TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. So I'm running an experiment. We'll see how it goes, but that's where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. Well, Ashley, thank you for being here with us today. I really do appreciate it. It was an enlightening conversation, and it's nice to see, people who take whatever adversity has happened in their life and work toward overcoming it, just like we hope that anyone that we're working with will do, and
Absolutely.
trust us to be a guide for them
Yeah.
to get them to the other side of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was a really fun conversation.
Awesome. And thank all of you for joining. Again, welcome to No CD. If you're looking for help for obsessive compulsive disorder, you could check us out at nocd.com. If you're living with OCD, we can help get you better. And that's really what our goal is. That is exactly what we want to do. We have therapists who are expertly trained in the use of exposure and response prevention therapy, and we work with OCD and related conditions. So go to nocd.com for more information. And if you like the Get to Know OCD podcast and want to learn more about some of the work that we're doing with that, you can subscribe on our No CD YouTube channel or anywhere where you get your podcast. Thanks for joining us, and thank you, Ashley, once again. And we'll see you all again next time. Talk to you later.